I wanted to go over very quickly where you should be with the game of Pig. So the purpose of doing Pig is, first of all, so you can get experience with your form design, setting up labels, buttons, etc. Changing what appears in a label with code, making a button work, so those are goals of the exercise. And we've been talking about if statements. This is a perfect example of when we might need to use if statements to make sure that somebody doesn't get their extra turn when they roll a 1, for example. And we're also learning that we can write code behind one button, and then we can actually call code that we wrote for one button from another button if we need to. So we're learning to write code one time and use it over and over. So just a refresher, and you have this handout in PDF format already. When we have this game, we're going to roll one die, 6-sided die, which means a random number from 1 to 6. We're going to let the player go first. The player is going to have the option to roll as many times as they want to, so we're going to have a button that allows them to roll. And when they get a 1, we're going to take their turn away. They're not going to get any points when they roll a 1. We're also going to give them the ability to press a hold button to say, you know, I've rolled 3 times, I haven't gotten a 1, maybe I should just stop where I'm at. And when they press the hold button, we're going to use that to trigger one roll of the die for the computer. Now we can add complexity to how we're going to let the computer score later, but right now, when the player stops, the computer is just going to roll 1 time. And we're also keeping a running total or an accumulator variable going that holds the total for the player and the total for the computer. So when a person rolls, let's say for example we have Anne, she rolls a 5. At that point her score becomes 5. She can hold and stop rolling, or she can keep rolling. She decides to roll again, she gets a 2, that bumps her total up to 7. Then she chooses to roll again, she gets a 1. She loses her turn and her score stays a 7. The next player rolls, and so on. So what you should have done at this point, you should have your form designed. What that means is take the form, make it a little creative, maybe change the background color of the form, but you're going to have to, at a minimum, create a few of the things that are on here. You're going to have a label, and I would name it LBL info, and in that label I would change the text property and put the title of the game, Game of Pig, and I would center that somewhere toward the top of the screen. You're going to need a second label called LBL instructions. It's going to have a short version of the rules. So you're going to put in here what I've got: roll the die, hold or roll again, roll a 1. Oops, that should be roll A1, you lose your turn, and when the first person to get to 100 or more wins. I would change the text property of LBL instructions, and I would put that somewhere right under the LBL info label. Grab a picture of something like a pig or a die, something that goes with the game, put a picture box on there and change the picture property to point to the picture chosen anywhere you want on the form. You're going to need a couple of buttons. You're going to need one named BTN Roll and have its text or its caption, the wording on it, have that say Roll Die in a nice font. Same thing, button Hold, BTN Hold. Now you're going to need to put those somewhere on the form, and once you get everything on the form you can drag and drop and move things around to make it look visually good. So then you need a couple more labels, LBL Player and LBL Computer. Put the text property of both of those to the number 0, because that's going to be where we're going to show the total points that each person has as the game goes on. And then right above those 2 labels that are holding the points, you might want to have a couple of labels just to say player score and computer score. So instead of just having the 2 numbers and you don't know which one is player and which one is computer, maybe right above those put some nice little labels so that it's obvious this one's the player score, that one's the computer score. And we did the video on if statements. You should still have the link in YouTube for that. Now here's the code that you need to have with explanations. So at the very beginning, at the very top of that code window where it says something like public form 1, if you didn't change the form name, we need to make some variables global. And what that means is we don't want to declare them behind buttons. When you declare or dim a variable behind a button, you can only use it in the code for that button. You can't use it behind another button or in a label or anything else easily. So when we put code and variable dim statements in that form area at the very top of the code window, we're making them global. We're saying we want to create a variable named whois. It's going to be a string, and it's going to hold either the letter P or the letter C to indicate whether it's player turn or computer turn. We need to be able to access that variable behind the hold button and the roll button. If we declared it under one of the buttons, the other one won't know what it is. So we've got to put it at the form level so anything on the form, any button, can use it. Then we're going to set up our random number generator. Our die variable, again, we want to put that at the form level so we can use it behind any button we need it. We're going to start the die at 0 just to make sure there's no bad junk left over in memory in there. We're also going to set up our two accumulator variables, player total and computer total. Those are integers. We're going to start them at 0, and then as the person scores, we're going to bump up the total. We're going to add to these variables. So they're accumulators. They're going to accumulate the score as the person rolls. Now behind the roll button specifically, you need some code. We're going to let the player start. That's why we defaulted whois to the letter P for player. So the player's going to go first. And when they click the roll button, we're going to give them their die roll. So we're going to randomly generate our die. And remember, when I use a 6 in parens after the next, that means generate numbers from 0 to 5. So in order to get them to be in the correct range, 1 to 6, I have to add 1 here. Now, we may take this message box out later, but I just want you to have a way when you roll to see what pops, to see what the die roll is. And right now we don't really have a label on the form to do that, so we're going to use a message box. So we're going to see what the user rolled so that you can double check the score and make sure that it's right. If they rolled a 1, and here's where our if statement comes in, not only do we need to not give them any points, we need to switch the turn. Now you don't have to type this line in, that's just a comment that I put in there to make it clear what was going on. If you do type it, make sure you put a single quote in front of it so that the compiler knows it's a comment and ignores it. So what we've got to do here is do the switch. Okay, if it's the player's turn, which we know because the variable whois will have the capital letter P in it, then switch it to the capital letter C for computer. Okay, so that flips the turn right there. However, if it's the computer's turn, we have to check both scenarios. If there's a C in whois, switch it to P. That's how we're switching the player. And notice we're not doing anything with any points, we're just switching the player. Then we're giving them the message, hey, you rolled a 1, you lost your turn. Alright, so again, there's our if statement. If a 1 is rolled, to switch the turn. Now this else goes with the if the die is a 1. If it's not a 1, we need to add up the score. So this is where the else comes in. If it was a 1, we took all this action. Otherwise, if it's anything other than a 1, we need to bump up the correct person's score. So again, now we need to check whose turn it is. Well, was it the player who just rolled? If it was, we're going to bump their total up in this accumulator variable with the amount or the number that was on the die. Then we're going to update the label and we're going to show their updated score. Now notice we have nested ifs here. We had that driving if that says if they rolled a 1, then there was another if in that self-contained if that flipped the player turn. Here's the rest of the else they didn't roll a 1. Notice we have another nested if in here. So if they didn't roll a 1, check who it is, which person's turn it is, and bump up the correct score and change the label. So if it was not the player's turn, then it must be the computer's turn. Then we're going to bump up the computer's total, and we're going to show the label correctly, having it reflect the new total. And here's the end if that goes with this if. And here's the end if that closes that outer, hey, is it a 1 or not? So that will give us the correct totals, and it will help us manage whose turn it is. So now when the player is done rolling, if they've lost their turn, we still need to put some code. We need to find a way to trigger the code to let the computer roll. Still working on that. But in the case where the player has made a conscious decision to stop rolling, they've had some good rolls and they don't want to press their luck with getting a 1, so they click the hold button. At that point right now, we're going to flip it to the player's turn. So we have to set who is equal to computer, say, hey, now it's the computer's turn, and we're going to actually trigger the code that we just wrote in the roll button by doing this me.buttonroll.perform click. So me is saying for this form, because I could have 20 forms and I might be using some of the same label and variable and button names on all the forms. When I say me dot, I'm saying find on this form, on me, find the BTN roll code, or find BTN roll, and then look for the code that's in its click event. So go ahead and pretend like I just clicked the roll button, and that's how you call the code that you wrote in another button from anywhere else in the project. So me means on the current form I'm on me, find BTN roll, and find the click code and perform it, perform the click event. So this will actually call that code just as if the computer had clicked the button, and it will go through nicely through the logic we set up. It'll say, oh wait, it's the computer's turn, the computer rolled a 6, bump their score up. Or oh wait, a 1 was rolled, it was the computer's turn, flip it back to player. So we still have a ways to go to make this fully functional, but this is a good start to allowing the computer to play, and then it gives the player to roll, and then it gives the computer 1 turn. So the goal is, at the end of the day, have your form set up, have this code set up, and then send me a screenshot for a homework/quiz grade.